Welcome everyone to the closing plenary for Pathway to 17 Summit 2022. This topic is going to be data for social impact. I'm really delighted that I've been joined today by Ronda Zelezny-Green, who is the Program Director of the Capacity Accelerator at networkatdata.org. Welcome, Ronda.
Thank you, Sarah. Nice to be here today.
It's great to have you with us. How have you found the summit over the last 3 days, Ronda?
Oh gosh, it's been so full of so much. I think one of the things that was really a highlight for me was the focus that I saw many speakers bring on micro, small, and medium enterprises, because I feel that over the past decade, they haven't gotten the due attention that they deserve. So seeing that here was very eye-opening for me, and I learned a lot.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ronda. I'm really glad that you've enjoyed the summit. And I'm also really hopeful that all our participants that have joined us over the last 3 days have joined us too. What I thought might be quite nice for us is to do some sort of synthesis of the summit. So those of you that maybe haven't been able to capture all of the sessions so far can have an understanding of what we've covered, and also some of the key points, right? Some of the key things that I've really enjoyed and learned from over the 3 days. So I thought to start really with why the purpose of the summit. And I think what's really important for me when I look at the attendee list, when I look at the speaker list, is actually how many different sectors we've got represented, how many different professions we have, geography and gender intentionality of our speakers too. We're really trying to bring different viewpoints, experiences, and ideas from different backgrounds: finance, economies, climate, gender equity, to learn, to try and catalyze those collaborations and implement changes in policies and regulation. We know that the SDGs are challenging and that the yearly target is not far off. And we've seen so many reports over the last few weeks that we're most likely behind. We are veering off track. We're not going to meet those SDGs unless we start to work together, accelerate and collaborate and innovate. So I hope that bringing people from different backgrounds together and some of the learnings you've had today has fired up the enthusiasm to take forward some of these initiatives and empower in your work, whatever that may be, whatever sector that may be. Thinking of inclusive societies through gender equity. So that was one of our streams. Some of the things that we talked about there were understanding the barriers facing women, evidence-based ways we can reach women through products, service, design, infrastructure, and inclusion in the workplace. Things like recruitment, having more women in leadership roles, for example, or understanding and working with culture and tradition in the workplace. We've started to collect more data and information that informs us of the triggers and tipping points, knowing when we can accelerate equity. One of the things that also came up, and Ronda, this very much tags to why you are here, why we're talking about data. Sex disaggregated data was a real challenge. It came up in many of our conversations, and I'm excited to explore that a little bit more with you in this session today. We also had a focus on finance and payments. As you said, the MSMEs were one of the focus areas. We also started looking at things like refugees, youth, rural population. Of course, we talked about women already. But often they are vulnerable and more excluded than others. And it's very important that we try and tackle and include these particular groups when it comes to thinking about finance and payments. One of the key barriers raised here was around digital literacy and familiarity with technology as well. Something that I think we talked about a lot in the different sessions and is something that we really need to tackle. We know less about the vulnerable. When it comes to thinking about what data and what we know about people, when it comes to things like using financial data, for example, if people are not in formal financial services, we know very little about how they are transacting. And that lack of data, again, we talked about the lack of gender disaggregated data, but also when you start to unpick it, we're lacking based on age, race, ethnicity, migratory status, disability, geographic location. It's much bigger than just gender. And that lack of information, that lack of data, that lack of understanding really hinders our ability to find scalable solutions to increase their financial resilience and economic growth. I like the fact that in our 3 days, we've moved away from just talking about financial inclusion, but actually trying to link much more to the SDG around no poverty, It's not okay just to be financially included, just to have an account. Actually, these things should be increasing resilience and growth.
Absolutely.
And, I think that's really important that we change our dialogue slightly, and that's why we started to breadth out and talk about digital economy, the use of technology and platforms, for example, machine learning, AI, open source APIs. Those are all terms I'm sure you all heard of, and hopefully you know more about, having been part of the conversation for the last 3 days. But like everything, they have the power to include or exclude, depending on what data, what information we feed into our AI algorithms, for example. That could lead to inclusion or exclusion. We also know there are many trust and privacy issues around data, and this only increases when we consider cross-border data flows or regional harmonization, which was one of the other great discussions that we had. How politically and across governments can we share data and information without having, sort of some of the worries around, trust and privacy that definitely are there. Ronda, I know that's something we're going to be talking about as well shortly. And finally, one of the other key streams that we talked about was around climate. I think we've all seen, hopefully not so much personally experienced, but definitely we've all seen the impact of climate change. We know this is a pressing agenda. We're also seeing much, much more focus on these 3 letters, ESG, environment, social, governance. It is something that is creeping into many of our conversations, whether that's donors, whether that is, private investments, and actually needing to really understand what those 3 seemingly small letters that are actually really going to be huge for our environments going forwards. And we've started to explore the need for new climate ventures, right? The launching, accelerating, funding and scale of ventures that are actually going to importantly support the climate agenda. We also talked about things like green bonds and carbon net zero. And I encourage you, if you don't know what those 2 terms are, that you listen to some of the discussions and conversations we had in the climate stream. They're going to be very important and terms that we're going to use more and more and more and hear more and more. We also know data on climate finance flows at global, national and sector levels are critical to scaling our climate action. We need to do things, and we need to do things now, but what do we need to do will very much be shaped by what data exists out there. And so for me, the reason why we have the wonderful Ronda with us on this closing panel is because data came up in every single stream, that there's not enough data in some of our areas, or there's not enough data, certainly reaching out to some of the more vulnerable groups that we want to start to have more economic growth and resilience. Data is very clearly a significant area that we should be focusing and looking on. And I'm really delighted that we've got what I consider a data expert with us on our closing plenary. So Ronda, please tell us a little bit about yourself, but also about data.org as well and its purpose.
Sure. So I've been working at the nexus of training the internet industry and data literally for about 12 years now. And in that time, one of the things that I have seen not change is the need for data. And we also know that bad data in is bad data out. And so a lot of the things that you mentioned earlier about the fact that not only is there a lack of gender data, despite the awareness that there is a lack of gender data, but so many other axes of identity and axes of exclusion is there a lack of data. And so in large part, data.org was created in 2020 to help address this need, in the sense of not that we will be data collectors, but we will help build the field of social impact where data is concerned. So right now, if you think about the various professions within the data sector, primarily many of these people are working in the private sector. So they're working to kind of increase shareholder value and profit and things of this nature. But less and less do you see these people working in government or even the third sector. And so in 2020, the Rockefeller Foundation and the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth got together and, funded data.org to be an organization that works at the forefront to build the field of data for social impact. Because without like a platform that is leading this charge, right now the sector is pretty fragmented. And so what we know we need to do is work together with a coalition of collaborators. So we're not saying we're the only people working in this space, but our aim is to be the platform that brings everyone together, to have everyone working towards the same or similar goals, and to change these circumstances as we know it, particularly for many of the points that you raised while summarizing the day's sessions.
That's great. And you mentioned data for social impact, right? That's a new phrase I've not personally heard from before. I'm curious. Tell me more. What is it? How is it different? What does it mean?
Data for social impact is also known as like data for good, data for social good, and various other iterations. So we did not create the term, but it is one of many referring to this new field. And so what we mean by that is the use of data by particular stakeholders. So in our case, we work with social impact organizations, and this can mean NGOs, governments, B corporations, or even social enterprises. And it's the idea that organizations working to promote societal advancement in any sector, they will need data to do that. So increasingly, a lot of the phraseology in international development is going to evidence-based decision-making. Well, one of the biggest sources of evidence is data. And so for us, the idea that individuals and organizations are empowered to not only collect data, but to use that data for increasingly sophisticated uses. So not just looking back at what has happened, but also being able to, in the future, predict what might happen and to make and take decisions on that basis. So this is what we mean by that.
Brilliant. So I'd love to know a little bit more about what kind of potential for change that it could unlock. Have you got an example or some sort of thoughts that you can sort of help those listening understand, what sort of situations we can apply the data and the evidence?
Sure, absolutely. So one of my favorite examples are an advisor to our organization used to be the CEO for the Benefits Data Trust in the United States. And the Benefits Data Trust used data, analyzed it to identify people in the United States. Typically, these are people with lower socioeconomic status who qualify for various state and federal benefits from government, but were not currently accessing or making use of those benefits. So they would use data to identify these people, contact them, and then help them get connected with the support that they had a right to. And that for me, and since they began, they've been able to unlock billions of dollars for people in the United States who really and truly need it the most. And that's an important point for me to make as well. So data.org, we work in developing contexts of the world, which can include places like the United States where I'm from. So that's one point. Another example, one of our grantees, so in January 2020, we had a challenge for inclusive growth and recovery. And so one of those awardees was Solar Sister, which operates throughout sub-Saharan Africa. And so what that funding helped Solar Sister to do was to better help their female the women that they have going out, connecting people to the various solar services, helping them to better identify their customers' needs and wants so that they can make sure they're addressing them appropriately. So helping more people in sub-Saharan Africa get connected to solar energy by, improving their own operations and really knowing their customer just even more better. Another example from an academic colleague of mine, Dr. Andrea Jimenez Cisneros in Peru, they are the city government of Lima said, everyone has equal fair access to quality quality water. And so they collected data and saw, hey, that this is not the case. So then we're using this data to identify areas of need in Lima, Peru, to basically then get the government to address these services. So, you know, it's hard to talk about things in platitudes, but when you have data there, and excuse the expression, but when you have it in black and white, it's much harder to ignore what is going on. And so these social uses to change things, you know, related to how people's lives, the quality of people's lives are, this is the main aim of our work.
That's fantastic. I mean, thank you for those different examples, because I think it gives us a real different context to know, you know, that sometimes it can unlock doors to, you know, sort of perhaps, you know, as you said, like in the US, for example, you know, getting those benefits, you know, but also being used there in Peru in terms of government settings. So really and truly, you know, the data is being used by multiple different partners across multiple different continents.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our work right now, so I'm the program director for the Capacity Accelerator Network, as you mentioned earlier. And so my mandate is to help reach and contribute to the upskilling and training of 1 million purpose-driven data practitioners by 2032. It's quite an audacious goal in 10 years to make that kind of impact. But again, as I said at the start, we're working with a group of collaborators to help make that happen. So how we are approaching this is through a network of network models, whereby we're identifying various hubs around the world, and then these hubs are, you know, activating their networks, and then all together we're one big network working towards data for social impact. So the first 3 hubs that we have, you know, in operation are one that's led by the University of Chicago in the United States, that's looking at financial inclusion. UChicago is working with 7 other historically Black colleges and universities, and also other minority and Hispanic serving institutions, to look at things in the United States where financial inclusion are concerned. So for example, one of our colleagues has a course from Howard University about Hello Black World, which is basically data for Black lives. So looking at data from the myriad ways it affects Black Americans. And Morehouse College, they were also working on being able to use data to look at the connection between homelessness and policing, and to make changes regarding the same. So that idea of financial inclusion, helping to empower people, runs the gamut and includes things like our problematic cash bail system in the US, whereby if you're put in jail, you need bail to get out. But if you're poor, you're then stuck in jail and then losing financial income producing opportunities. So that's kind of the work there. And just last month at the United Nations General Assembly, we announced 2 new hubs, and these are going to be in sub-Saharan Africa and India. And I'm not more specific about Africa just yet, because our partner there, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, that hub, they are in the process of, you know, examining all the different country partners that they have and narrowing it down to about 5. So within a year's time, we'll have those 5 specific countries there, but inevitably the work will go beyond those 5 specific countries to impact the entire continent. And in India, we're working with JPAL South Asia. And similarly, what both of these organizations, a Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and then JPAL South Asia, in conjunction with the university in India, are going to be working on climate and health challenges. So some of this is going to include, and I forgot to mention that as well for UChicago, they're going to be curating, identifying data sets, applying the various data skills and models and whatnot to these types of problems, and really working to identify, like, how can we make positive change? And so all of these 3 hubs are working with a network of stakeholders. And then when they're all linked together, which is what data.org does, we kind of like amplify this impact even further. And so our aim, at least where my work is concerned, is around building them up, and helping to skill them, looking at the curriculum, looking at how we make this curriculum available on digital platforms in addition to face-to-face. But that's not the only work we do at data.org, because we also have a program called Epiverse, and Epiverse is like the practical application of the data and tools and skills to the public health intelligence world. So Epiverse works on creation of tools based on the programming language R that are then used or able to be used by governments to help identify and prevent the next epidemic, because I think we're all very familiar with coronavirus and COVID-19, but this is not the only epidemic or pandemic that affects different parts of the world. And so Epiverse works to create these tools, and at the Capacity Accelerator Network, we help with the training so that people can use these Epiverse tools and apply them. So it's similar to what we're doing across all of our hubs, where although training, upskilling, capacity building is kind of like a horizontal, that then enables us and our partners to unlock, in climate, in health, in financial inclusion. And we expect that this will continue to grow to other verticals in the years to come.
And that kind of vertical overlap is really why we're talking today, that pathway to 17 and the different verticals we have resembles sort of some of the aims that you're trying to have as well, sort of different professionals, collaboration, and from different backgrounds. So that's wonderful. And that leads me, I've got two questions. I've got lots of questions, but I'm going to ask you two. Sure. You mentioned you're capacitating, was it a million people?
Yes.
That leads me to the question. I'm assuming then that we have a talents and skills shortage, if that's your very ambitious goal, right?
Sure, that's right. So we had a report that we authored and released in June of 2022 called Workforce Wanted. And you can get that on the data.org website. And we saw that the gap between, the need for people in the data professions now and the forthcoming need is massive. We saw that it's at least about 3.5 million. And not all of these roles were in the social sector, but obviously a great many of them will be. And so with this gap, we know that it's not just that the people are missing, but the type of people that are missing. So there's already been groundbreaking work by others like Sophia Noble and Joy Bulowamini, who highlight the fact that, some of the data products like algorithms that are produced are racist and or misogynist or some other, very bad social deficiency. And so we're not just saying that we need to help upskill or bring more people into data for social impact, but these people need to be like me and you, Sarah. Then we need more women. We need more people who are Black. We need more people who have disabilities. We need more people from different castes, from different socioeconomic statuses, the whole gambit, because without having that collaborative and inclusive and intersectional mindset to the capacitating that we're going to do in the next 10 years, we literally will have more of the same. And so what we really intend to do here is to change those circumstances by, in our own efforts, being intentional about intersectionality and who we reach out to and recruit, because that is what's really going to change the world. And it can't be that we're just continuing to talk about needing this inclusion and diversity and equity and access. We have to be that change. And so that's why I'm so proud to be at data.org, because it's the first organization that I've worked for that is taking that element of their work seriously and being very intentional about it.
And you answered my second question, because my second question was very much about that concept of the diversity. So thank you for sort of really emphasizing that. And I think, something incredibly important that we, to have that diversity in the workforce, incredibly important. Is it sort of, I wanted to put an emerging economies lens on this question, because, sort of that was a lot of what Pathway was about, is focusing on emerging economies. Is the shortage even greater there? And you're obviously opening hubs in India and Africa, so that's kind of telling me you're stepping in that direction, right?
Sure. So I have to say that I wouldn't necessarily say that it's greater, but I think the shortage of people with data skills is greater in emerging economies. But when you go from the angle of IDEA, which is inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, and intersectionality, you see the same issues. So where there are people in emerging economies who are skilled in some way with data. And by the way, for us, data professions includes like data collectors on up to data engineers and data scientists that span the entire data life cycle. But in emerging economies, typically it's going to be men. It's typically going to be people of higher socioeconomic status as well. And so this kind of reproduction of those axes of exclusions is present no matter where we are in the world trying to address this issue. And so I think that in emerging economies, we have an even bigger challenge because we know that some of the barriers to participation in a sector like this are even greater. And so this is why we work with local partners. We're not trying to be like a global north entity, controlling everything. And actually, our staff is not all global north either. And I consider myself like straddling the two because of the way that I grew up in the United States. So for us, it's really like that recognition that there are these, unique challenges, and depending on where we work, we need to be very mindful of this, consider this data in our analysis, and making sure that we're doing all that we can to be inclusive, to be different, and to have impact by 2032 that we can all stand behind and be proud of, because we have done it differently and we have respected the people who are typically last being put first now.
And so putting a lens on, we are now 10 years down the line. We're hitting that goal when you sort of, you've grown your workforce. What will you see different? What are you hoping that you will be able to see as a result from the work that you've been doing?
Sure. So I think there will be changes. So one of the people that really inspires me so much is Caroline Criado Perez, who wrote this fantastic book about gender and data, which show what the impact is when we don't have enough data along axes of diversity. So for example, crash test dummies are typically modeled off of the male anatomy. And because of this, women, it's undeniable that women fare poorer in car crashes. So something like this that is impactful to everyone, whether you're female or not, is a huge deal. And so I hope by 2032, with helping to develop a workforce that is more diverse, that is thinking about these issues from very different perspectives, like having a true diversity of thought on the basis of who people are, that our data products and tools and services will be much more informed and will be contributing much more to creating social good, as opposed to thinking about how can we make more cost savings for our shareholders? How can we do things that, connect more people to benefits, that help prepare and protect people from the effects of climate, that help people avoid, slipping into a pandemic in their nation, or in their region. And so by 2032, I want to see more people empowered to do more good with data. That is our overall aim, and not just people, but organizations, because, typically right now in the social sector, if there is someone in a data role like data analyst, data scientist, data engineer, data collector, or whatever, they're almost always working alone. But that's because they have that in their title. But everyone within a social impact organization has a responsibility where data is concerned. And so also trying to make sure that mindset is changed, that even if that's not your, specific interest, that you are being aware of what data is and how it can affect your organization.
And I think I'd be remiss not to ask you a question about trust, privacy, data protection, because we've heard that coming up over the last 3 days. And in particular, there are some parts of our population that are more vulnerable, don't necessarily want data to be collected or about them for fear of, sort of repercussions, prosecution, etc. How do you and how do data.org see, that respect between sort of respecting people's privacy, but also actually the need that we do need to understand so that we can actually create the social impact that we want in this world?
Sure. So while data privacy, trust, and so forth are not like the specific remit or focus of data.org, I would say that the way that we address this, even with our partners, is by making sure that whenever we are designing an intervention, whenever we're collaborating with these stakeholders, the people who are set to benefit, or however you want to term the intervention, are involved from the start. So it is not like us saying, okay, this is our idea, this is what we're going to do, it's our way or the highway. So making sure that that idea and intersectionality is included from the beginning, that collaboration is informed from the start. So as an example, my colleagues in the Epiverse are working with 2 universities in South America, and those universities in South America are leading the work that Epiverse is feeding into, because of course they have the knowledge about what is needed in their context. So the way that we operate means that, where there are potentials for issues related to trust and privacy, we are already going to have been informed by that, and the program design is going to reflect that, because the worst thing would be to be in a position where we are responsible for contributing to further harm to people who have already been so harmed already.
Well, that's really great to know, and that kind of, that involvement and that slightly different focus, different way of thinking about the projects and the use of data, and that involvement as well sounds like a fairer way, certainly, to approach the use of people's information, right?
Absolutely.
And so my final question to you, Rhonda, is, hopefully people have got, heard a lot in this session, and it's sort of made them think, I want to learn more. Maybe I can be part of these hubs. Maybe I want to pursue my own personal career and develop myself so that I can be one of those 1 million people. How do people go about being, part of this new workforce, and also utilizing, the data that's as for social impact? How do they do it? Where do they go from here?
Thank you, Sarah. That's an excellent question. I think, there are 2 things. So obviously our website, which is data.org, and what we are doing there as a platform for partnerships and awareness about data for social impact. We have some incredible resources, including a resource library, which is doing exactly what you said. Like, where do I get started? How do I know what's for me? There are several resources there that can help people get started on their journey. We kind of envisage the various pathways for talent and data in 4 buckets. New talent, so people who have no data skills and are not familiar with the social impact sector. Existing talent, which is people who are in the social sector but no data skills. Transitional talent, people who have the data skills but don't have the social impact background. And then also leaders. So a lot of our resources are geared to these 4 buckets, and leaders being important because if you lead a social impact organization, you need to have a data strategy. And of course, your leader is going to be the one responsible for that. And so our website breaks down resources in this manner. We also have, not just for individuals, we have resources for organizations. So we have a digital maturity assessment that we have created, and we have already gotten nearly 1,000 different social impact organizations from around the world to take this assessment. And when people take this assessment from an organizational standpoint, typically what they come to see is, how far along their organization is in terms of data maturity. And so after they take that assessment, they are also then referred to resources from our library that can help them take the next step in their data journey. So data.org, our website has a plethora of resources and things that, really, really will help you get started on your way. Separate from that, I'm definitely open to new opportunities, collaborations. In fact, with the Capacity Accelerator Network, part of my job over the past few months has been identifying those new partners that we can collaborate with, particularly, as funding opportunities arise, as, interventions are created where other stakeholders may have a strong role to play. We are building up this network. And so, yes, please join me. If you want to contribute to this, if you want to do more, I'd like to shout out on the continent. We have supporters at Blossom Academy, Zindi Africa, and then also Ishango that are in our network already working to support us with various activities at data.org. So please feel free to get in touch with me. My email address is ronda@data.org, RONDA @data.org. Our website, data.org, has several resources. And then, hopefully see you at some events or on the ground doing the good work.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ronda. I think I'm going to jump off right now and go check out the website and the resources. It sounds like there's a lot to get through. It's really made me excited to hear, we're all trying to work towards this common goal, of social impact, of, for us, here at Pathway in particular, achieving the SDGs. And it sounds like, that actually there's a lot of work going here with data.org that will really help us understand the changes that we want to make and have that evidence base, and then be able to actually implement action and scale to achieve. I've really loved this time with you. I wish we could go on longer, but I think, for the sake of letting everybody and closing Pathway, we're going to have to close there. But thank you very much for joining us on this closing plenary and for just tying everything back together over the last 3 days, Ronda. It's been really wonderful to speak with you.
It was my pleasure, and it's such an honor to be here, particularly along with my fellow speakers and the attendees. So thank you so much to the Digital Frontiers for organizing this and inviting me to participate.
Thank you so much. And I'll also just like to say thank you very much to our other panelists, speakers, the moderation team, the tech and events team behind the scenes who put together the 3 days. And thank you to our sponsors who've helped source and fund and get us through the last 3 days of Pathway. But very much, most importantly, thank you. Thank you, attendees, for joining us, for listening to us. We really hope that we've given you a lot of thoughts, some ideas, some ways forward, hopefully some new contacts that you've networked with during the 3 days. And I really look forward to seeing you on other events, including next year's Pathway to 17 Summit. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.